2:47 a.m. Whitechapel, London. The streets were dead quiet. The kind of quiet that feels wrong. A figure moved through the rain. Black coat. Head down. No face visible. He turned into a dark alleyway, crouched beside a bin and placed something underneath it. A brown envelope. No name. No markings. He disappeared back into the darkness without a single word. For streets away, Detective Mara Hale's phone rang. Unknown number. A distorted voice spoke just one sentence. Whitechapel. The alley behind the betting shop. 20 minutes. After that, it disappears forever. Line dead. Mara sat in the dark for 3 seconds. Then she grabbed her jacket. She had no idea that envelope was about to destroy everything she thought she knew. Before we go any further, if you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is only getting darker, and you do not want to miss what happens next. If you looked up the word untouchable in the dictionary, you would find a definition. But if you looked hard enough in the back streets of London's financial world, you would find a photograph of Alexander Pierce. 51 years old. 6'2". Silver-haired with sharp gray eyes that missed absolutely nothing. He wore tailored suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent and carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had never once been told no. On paper, Alexander Pierce was everything society admired. Chairman and founder of Pierce Capital Group, one of London's most powerful private investment firms. The kind of company whose name appeared on the side of buildings, whose logos sat quietly in the corner of hospital wings and university libraries. A company that had its fingers in government contracts, NHS procurement deals, property development, and international finance. Worth an estimated £2.3 billion. Respected, decorated, dangerous. He sat at the head of a long glass table on the 14th floor of his Canary Wharf tower, the whole of London spread out behind him like a painting he personally owned. 6 men in expensive suits sat around the table hanging on his every word. Nobody spoke unless Alexander spoke first. Nobody moved unless Alexander moved first. This was his empire, built over 20 years from nothing but ambition, ruthlessness, and a complete absence of conscience. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, closing the folder in front of him, "everything is running exactly as it should." The men nodded. What those men did not know, what almost nobody knew, was that beneath the glass towers and the charitable donations and the government handshakes, Alexander Pierce had been running something else entirely. Something that had made him far richer than any legitimate business ever could. Fraud, manipulation, and when necessary, something far darker. He had never lost a single night of sleep over any of it. Floors below Alexander's office sat a smaller, but equally impressive room. This belonged to Victor Hale, 44 years old, broad-shouldered, dark eyes that gave very little away. Victor was the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately understood the power dynamics within it, who to respect, who to dismiss, who to watch carefully. His official title was Chief Operations Officer of Pierce Capital Group. His unofficial title was the man who made problems disappear. Whatever Alexander needed handled, Victor handled it. Quietly. Efficiently. Without question. A difficult business partner who needed persuading. A contract that needed steering in the right direction. An employee who had started asking questions they had no business asking. Victor dealt with all of it. From the outside, Victor Hale looked like every other successful London businessman. He drove a black Range Rover, lived in a beautiful townhouse in Greenwich, had a wife named Sandra who volunteered at the local school and made excellent Sunday roasts. He attended church on Christmas and Easter. He coached his nephew's Sunday league football team every weekend without fail. He was the perfect picture of respectability. And that was exactly why Alexander had chosen him. Alexander and Victor had not always been on the same side. 12 years ago, Victor Hale was a mid-level financial analyst at a struggling investment bank. Decent at his job. Going nowhere fast. He had a young family, a mortgage he could barely afford, and a gambling problem he told nobody about. The gambling problem was what Alexander found first. £180,000 in debt. 3 different lenders. One of them not the kind you could simply stop returning calls to. Alexander appeared in Victor's life like a solution to a problem. Calm. Generous. Offering to make the debt disappear overnight. No interest. No repayment plan. Just loyalty. I need someone I can trust completely. Someone with everything to lose. Victor shook his hand that night. He had been shaking ever since, though he would never admit it. Because what Alexander held over Victor was not just the memory of that debt. Over the years, Alexander had made sure Victor's hands were dirty enough that walking away was never truly an option. Every deal, every cover-up, every disappeared problem. Victor's fingerprints were on all of it. He was in too deep to ever climb out, and Alexander knew it. Every time Victor looked across that boardroom table and met Alexander's calm gray eyes, he was reminded of one simple truth. He belonged to Alexander Pierce. Completely and permanently. On the other side of London, in a world that could not have been more different, Detective Mara Hale was running late for work. 38 years old. Mixed heritage. Natural hair pulled back tight. The kind of face that looked calm even when everything around her was chaos, which in her line of work was most of the time. She had been a detective for 11 years. Sharp. Instinctive. The kind of officer who noticed things other people walked straight past. She grabbed her badge off the kitchen counter, took one last sip of cold coffee, and headed for the door. Her phone buzzed. A message from her sister Sandra. "Coming for dinner Sunday? Victor's doing his famous lamb." Mara smiled and typed back quickly. Wouldn't miss it. She had known Victor Hale for 9 years. Since the day her sister brought him home for Christmas looking nervous and overdressed. Mara had liked him immediately. He was warm. Funny. Generous with his time and his money. He adored Sandra. He was patient with the kids. As far as Mara was concerned, Victor was one of the good ones. She locked her front door and headed down the stairs toward her car. The morning was cold and gray. Typical London, typical Monday. She had absolutely no idea that the man she was going to Sunday dinner with was the same man she would soon be hunting. Detective Marie was already at her desk when Mara walked into the station. 35 years old. Razor sharp. The kind of woman who read people the way most people read menus. Quickly, accurately, and with a very clear idea of what she wanted to order. She and Mara had been partners for 6 years. They worked well together because they were different in exactly the right ways. Mara led with instinct. Marie led with evidence. Between the two of them, very little got passed unnoticed. Marie looked up as Mara dropped into her chair. "You're late." "I'm here, aren't I?" Mara replied, pulling up her screen. Marie watched her for a moment, said nothing, but filed something quietly away in the back of her mind, the way she always did. Something had been bothering Marie for a while now. Nothing she could name yet. Just a feeling. The particular feeling she got when something was slightly off, but she couldn't yet see where the crack was. It had something to do with Victor Hale. She had met him twice at work events. Both times he had been perfectly charming. Perfectly polished. Too perfectly polished. The kind of man who never said a wrong word because he had rehearsed every right one. Marie trusted instinct. And her instinct said something about Victor Hale did not add up. She had said nothing to Mara. Not yet. Meanwhile, back in Canary Wharf, Alexander Pierce was finishing his morning meeting. As his associates filed out, he stayed behind, standing at the floor-to-ceiling window watching the city below. His phone buzzed once. A message from Victor. Situation handled. No loose ends. Alexander read it. Typed back 2 words. Good man. He slipped the phone into his pocket and turned back to the window. London stretched out before him. Millions of people going about their ordinary lives, completely unaware that the man looking down at them had been stealing from their hospitals, their public services, their future, for over a decade. He straightened his tie, picked up his coffee, and smiled. Before you disappear, hit subscribe and stay with us. The story is just getting started. It never runs out of secrets. Every street corner hides a story. Every glass tower conceals a lie. Every handshake between powerful men carries a price that ordinary people will never see on any invoice. The city moves fast and looks forward, never back. That is how secrets survive here. Not because people are blind, but because looking back costs too much. But sometimes, just sometimes, a secret grows too large to stay hidden. And when it finally surfaces, somebody always pays the price. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The kind of Tuesday that felt completely unremarkable. Gray sky. Busy streets. London doing what London always does, moving fast and asking no questions. At 7:43 a.m. a black Range Rover pulled up outside a coffee shop on Lower Thames Street. The driver stayed in the car, engine running. The passenger, a man in a dark suit carrying a leather briefcase, stepped out and walked inside without looking left or right. His name was Thomas Garrett. 57 years old. Senior financial investigator at the National Crime Agency. A quiet man who had spent 30 years following money trails that powerful people desperately needed to stay hidden. He had recently found something. Something enormous. Something that had kept him awake for the past 6 weeks, staring at his bedroom ceiling, running the numbers over and over in his head, hoping he had made a mistake somewhere. He hadn't. He ordered a black coffee and sat at a corner table facing the door, the habit of a man who had learned to always watch his exits. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thin brown folder. Inside were documents that had taken him 18 months to compile. Evidence of systematic fraud running through some of the most powerful financial institutions in London. Hundreds of millions of pounds stolen from NHS procurement contracts. Government infrastructure deals. Public money. Ordinary people's money quietly redirected into private accounts through a web of shell companies, so deliberately complicated it had taken him the better part of 2 years to untangle. He had one meeting this morning. One person he trusted enough to hand this to. He checked his watch. 7:48. The contact was late. He never saw the man who sat down across from him. By the time Thomas Garrett looked up from his folder, it was already too late. The man smiled politely. Said something quiet that nobody nearby could hear. Slid something small across the table. Thomas looked down at it. Then back up. His face had changed completely. 20 minutes later, Thomas Garrett walked out of that coffee shop alone. He left his briefcase behind. He left his coffee untouched. He walked to the embankment wall overlooking the Thames, and stood there for a long time staring at the dark water moving silently below. Then he took the folder from under his arm and dropped every single page into the river. 30 years of instinct. 18 months of work. Gone. The documents scattered across the dark water and slowly sank beneath the surface one by one. Thomas Garrett watched until the last page disappeared. Then he walked away without looking back. The case, officially, never existed. By lunchtime, the story had already been buried. No arrests. No investigation. No headlines. As far as the world was concerned, nothing had happened on Lower Thames Street that Tuesday morning. Just another ordinary day in London. But 3 people knew differently. Alexander Pierce sat in his Canary Wharf tower and read a one-line message on his phone. "Garrett has been handled." He deleted the message immediately, picked up his coffee, and moved on to his next meeting without missing a single beat. Somewhere below him in the city his empire kept running. Contracts kept moving. Money kept flowing in the wrong direction. And nobody, as far as he was concerned, was anywhere close to finding out. He was almost right. Detective Marie had not been assigned to the Thomas Garrett case. Nobody had. Because officially, there was no Thomas Garrett case. But Marie had a habit that had served her well throughout 11 years of detective work. She read everything. Every report. Every incident log. Every witness statement that crossed her desk, whether it belonged to her or not. 3 days after that Tuesday morning, something small caught her eye. A CCTV report. Routine. Filed by a junior officer and marked as low priority. It mentioned a disturbance outside a coffee shop on Lower Thames Street. A man leaving without his belongings. A black Range Rover parked outside for exactly 4 minutes, then leaving at speed. The junior officer had noted it as nothing significant. Marie noted it very differently. She pulled Garrett's name quietly. Off the record. What she found made her sit back slowly in her chair. Thomas Garrett, National Crime Agency. 30-year career. Spotless record. Currently on indefinite leave following what his department described as a personal matter. Marie had been doing this long enough to know what personal matter meant. It meant someone had got to him. She printed nothing. Saved nothing to the system. Wrote 3 lines in her personal notebook and closed it quietly in her drawer. She said nothing to Mara. Not yet. But something was already turning in her mind, like a key in a lock that hadn't been opened in a very long time. Marie did not know, could not have known, was that the black Range Rover outside the coffee shop belonged to a fleet registered to a shell company. A shell company that traced back through 4 layers of deliberately complicated paperwork to Pierce Capital Group. She was already closer than she realized. And she was already being watched. He was waiting outside her flat when she got home that evening. Elias, leaning against the wall beside her front door. Calm. Relaxed. Like a man who had every right in the world to be standing there. 39 years old. Lean and quietly powerful. The kind of man whose stillness felt more threatening than other men's aggression. Sharp eyes that always seemed to be calculating something just beneath the surface of whatever expression he was wearing. On the surface, Elias was Marie's boyfriend of 14 months. Attentive. Thoughtful. The kind of man who remembered small details. How she took her tea, which side of the bed she preferred, that she hated the sound of television when she was trying to think. Marie had fallen for him quickly. More quickly than she was comfortable admitting to herself. What she did not know, what she had absolutely no reason to suspect, was that Elias had been placed in her life deliberately. He was Alexander Pierce's third in command. And his relationship with Marie was not coincidence. It was strategy. Cold. calculated, and executed perfectly. "Long day?" he said as she reached the door. "Always," she replied. She was glad to see him. That was the worst part. She was always genuinely glad to see him. He followed her inside, made tea without being asked, moved around her kitchen with the easy comfort of someone completely at home. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. He asked about her day the way he always did. Warm, interested, patient, and then, casually. So casually it almost felt like nothing. "I heard you were looking into something today. Off the books." Marie went very still. She kept her face completely neutral. Years of detective training holding firm. "Where did you hear that?" she said quietly. Elias smiled. But it didn't quite reach his eyes this time. "Marie." His voice stayed gentle, but something underneath it had shifted, like a piano note played in a minor key instead of major. Just slightly wrong. "You are very good at your job. That is one of the things I love most about you. But there are some things that are bigger than both of us. Some doors that are better left closed." He reached across and covered her hand with his. "Is that a suggestion?" she said quietly. "It's a kindness," he replied softly. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside a bus rumbled past. Somewhere above them a neighbor's television murmured through the ceiling. Marie looked at his hand covering hers, then slowly back up at his face. She smiled, squeezed his hand gently. "Thank you for the tea," she said simply. Elias nodded, smiled back, but the moment he looked down at his cup something shifted behind Marie's eyes. Cold, quiet, certain. She knew. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. The man sitting across from her, the man she had let into her home and her life and her heart, had just made the single biggest mistake of his very carefully constructed existence. He had shown her exactly where to look. And Marie never stopped once she knew where to look. That was episode 1 of The Most Dangerous Envelope in London. If this story has you hooked, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Episode 2 is coming. And trust me, the fall of Alexander Pierce is something you do not want to miss. This is Crime Axis. See you next time.